Does that work? Everything
I think
functioning?
so. Yeah.
Okay. So from here,
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'd like to call to order our Budget Committee meeting. I believe our chair, John Stoll, is probably trying to get in, but we haven't seen him come in yet. The rest of the Budget Committee is here except for Michael, what's his last name? Osborne. Michael Osborne couldn't take part tonight. Otherwise, the Budget Committee is here. I guess the first order of business is approving the minutes from the last meeting. Do we want to go? I mean, we sometimes go around and do introductions, but we don't have any new people this time. So do people feel like we want to do introductions? Or?
Well, perhaps just so the folks watching know who the council are and who the citizen members are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
might as well do it.
I'll call you off in the order I see you on my screen. So I'm a city councilor, member of the Budget Committee, Lisa Beatty. Wilda, why don't you go next?
Wilda Park, city councilor. John's coming in.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Mark, go ahead. You're muted.
Mark Gamba, I'm the mayor.
Leslie?
Leslie Schachner, citizen member.
Councilor Heisey?
The title gives me away. Kathy Heisey, council member.
Kaylee?
Kaylee Nance, citizen member.
Council President?
Angel Falconer, counselor.
Mary?
Mary Rose, citizen member.
And John, are you with us? You're muted if you are. We can't see or hear you, but we see your name.
He's here.
There he is.
Well, maybe.
Okay, we saw you momentarily. There we go.
You're
Or
going.
not. Or not. We've got a number of city staff, budget, and the city manager on with us. And
Maybe John has some black eyes too, and that's why he's camera shy.
It does look like he has a bandage of some sort on his arm. I noticed that. So we're all falling apart here. Okay, I guess while we wait for John's connection, it's the first order of business to approve the minutes from the last meeting. I'm looking at you, Bonnie. Yeah, okay. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes from the last meeting?
I didn't. I would move to approve.
I can second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None heard. Minutes are approved. And at this point, it looks like our chair is back, is connected, although his audio is still muted. So I will turn it back over to him.
You're muted.
Hello?
Okay, now. There you go.
John.
I don't have an agenda in front of me. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So the next order of business is actually public comments.
Is there anyone in the room who wants to make, in the Zoom, wants to make public comments?
No.
Hearing none.
And there is no emails.
Zoom again.
Did we lose him again?
Looks like, at least momentarily.
Yeah, it seems like he might have a spotty
Wi-Fi connection.
connection or something. So maybe Lisa, you should
Keep going.
keep going until we find out, until John can get a solid.
All right, I heard that there were no emails for anyone wanting to public comment, and I don't see anyone in the participant list raising hands or anything. So I guess we will move on to the city manager update.
So this time has been set aside as updates for major construction projects and also just things that are happening here in the city. So I think that the most pertinent piece of my work recently is our equity work in alignment with council's new goal. That's actually going to be discussed during our budget adjustment discussion. So unless people have questions, I don't have anything to add this evening.
You mentioned that it's also construction projects, and that made me wonder, we're now getting a monthly update from Kelly on the SAFE and other projects. Does that go to the budget committee?
Those
not, but it could, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are going into the packets, like our community development updates go into the packets for council meetings. So it wouldn't be a big deal for us to add that. And I'm happy to talk to Kelly about that.
Okay. Great. Because we're getting, for you who haven't seen it, we get, a monthly update on, and several of the SAFE projects, of the sidewalk projects, are going to launch this fall and winter. They're going to go out to bid, and you're going to start seeing there's like 4 big projects that'll be under construction in the next year. So, so it's good to see these updates and see where they stand.
Absolutely. And since we're talking about it for just 1 minute, I'd also like to give some appreciation, I think is probably the term, to our engineering team and to Kelly Brooks for just the quality and caliber of the work that's being produced right now. A couple of years ago, we had a conversation with the budget committee about some of those expenditures not going timely and not getting out the door as quickly as we'd like. And at this point, I've been really impressed with the team for delivering the CIP on the schedule that's been provided. So thank you to them.
Absolutely. Okay, if nothing else for the city manager, we'll go to Bonnie for the review and discussion of the quarterly financial report.
Okay, so I'm going to go over the highlights for the fourth quarter for the fiscal year ending 2020 as of June 30th. So overall, the citywide fund balances ended the year at $51.2 million, which is a decrease from the beginning fund balance for the year of about 7%. This is attributed to mostly the capital projects being completed that probably what we just discussed, and we also had other items like the library completed. There's a lot of the SAFE projects, those have been completed, so that's what's bringing down quite a bit of the fund balance. Another piece of the highlights for the quarterly, LGIP average interest reduced from 2.08% to 1.3%. Looking ahead into the new fiscal year, we just received notice as of July 23rd that the interest rate is at 1%. So we're going to continue to see those declines, which is what we anticipated during the budget process already.
Are those tied to the Fed rates, or what are those tied to?
There's a tie to the federal rates and the prime rates. I don't exactly know the relationship of it, but they are tied to everything that's going on in the economy as well. New state gas tax revenue received for the quarter was at $79,000, which brought the total in for about, to date, about $323,000. This is a revenue source that we do continue to see the declines as we are just now seeing the effects of everyone working from home and not using the roads starting in this quarter. Since we started mid-March, is when really most of the quarantine started and everybody started working from home. We're going to continue to see that decline going into the next quarter because there's a 2-month lag in the revenue that we get received from the state. Other items within this report that I want to point out is that the balances for fiscal year 2020 are unaudited. We are currently in the middle of our fiscal year end audit with the auditors, which is Marina and Company. So as we go through the various work papers, adjustments, accruals, and whatnot over the next couple months, some of these balances may change just because we are also going through that process and also working with the auditors. We try to make sure we get all the accruals in for this report as we can, but since we are in the middle of the audit, I wanted to point that out. The City Hall Fund was created in this report based off the supplemental budget that we did. It also will show the purchase of the City Hall, which I will show when we get there. And then also just keeping in mind that during the budget process, several of the funds departments had those budget reductions where we had asked, because of what's going on with the recession and the pandemic and so forth, we had asked the directors to reduce their budgets and hold on spending. So you will see that coming through in this report and a lot of the expenditure line items and the fund balances. Okay, so I was going to jump into general fund unless there was any other questions on some of the beginning highlighted areas. So looking at general fund, the notable items here is that you'll see the decline in intergovernmental revenue. Again, a lot of that is timing and accounts for some significant items. But one of those significant items is the reduction in the TriMet officers. So when we had gone through the budget process, there was some hours being reduced in the TriMet officers. And then finally that contract did get ended as of June 30th. So there is some intergovernmental revenues that you see the decline here. Another area is the licenses and permits. This is definitely due to everything that's going on with the quarantine period. This line includes business registrations, parking permit fees, not citations, just the permits, and a lot of the other development fees. So this license and permits did see a reduction, less than what we anticipated for the budget. Overall in expenditures are at 89% of the budget, which shows the reduction that I mentioned earlier. There was also planned under expend. So there's areas such as community development. There was the $250,000 set aside in there for Milwaukee Bay Park that was moved into the next biennium budget. And then also within the non-departmental, you'll see the transfer from general fund into the City Hall fund to cover the City Hall purchase and planned expenditures there. Okay.
Bonnie, this might be a question you don't have an answer to, but I was just curious if maybe Anne would know if under the licenses and permits early in the pandemic, we were hearing some complaints from residents in downtown that they didn't have places to park in quite the same way. So I was just curious if we'd seen an uptick in parking permits after we tried to make that work a little better for folks, or what was going on there. The answer might be.
Well, I'll have to dig in to see if there is an uptick in the permits, but I don't believe that there was. And I based that off of my visual of the office. I don't know if Anne's got more.
I don't have more. We did see a drop off as we saw people returning downtown Milwaukee in complaints. So the drop off was in complaints because businesses started reopening and actually providing services on site. The parklets also took up some of the stalls for the pandemic dining space.
Okay, thanks.
And one of the other permit, I happen to be one of the people who has this permit, which is for an alarm system, and that was held up because the city was undergoing new software and a
whole new system.
Overhauling the system. So those letters didn't go out until June, I think, or something. I will report that I paid mine and I got billed a second time. So the contractor that's handling those is may not be on top of things very well, but I will just
I'll check in with the police chief. I actually haven't done that since we started the process, but I'll check in with him.
I have a question about, and actually this is one of my questions reading the packet, and you referenced it, Bonnie. What actually happened with the police department and TriMet? I looked in my notes and I didn't see anything that mentioned that we were completely ending our contract. I just am trying to understand what happened. What is the story there that we quit doing that or whatever?
I would actually turn this over to council in order to respond, but I'm happy to if they prefer. It's up to them. It happened at the June 16th budget council meeting, and it happened during the budget action in order to adopt the budget. So that is the meeting, and there was a council discussion that happened in probably the first, I don't know, half an hour of the budget discussion on the council agenda.
So
volunteer.
What's the answer? What happened?
Angel, do you want to take it?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to it.
Put your microphone down.
Sorry about that. I had taken a drink of water and didn't put it back. Yeah, I can speak to that. We were receiving quite a bit of community input on that and other budget items. And so on council, we had a discussion. It was the June meeting adopting the budget to change a portion of the budget relating to the TriMet contract. We hadn't actually signed to renew that contract, and so at that council meeting, we decided to cease that contract based on information that we were receiving from the community, including. And we also had a conversation about how we would prefer to see our police officers policing in the city of Milwaukee, rather than riding on TriMet's trains and buses, where the evidence was not showing that was a useful or helpful and in terms of making people feel safer on transit. The outcomes were not really in line with our goals as a city, and so we decided to not re-up that contract, which resulted in a change in the budget.
So I also am in favor of our police in our city, but I'm wondering if there are impacts from the decision on TriMet's own operations that are of concern to people here.
Well, TriMet board has written us asking to meet on that. And I don't know what this plan is for that, but they have asked for a meeting on that.
Are we the only city that's done that at this point?
No, the city of Portland withdrew it from their contract. That is, which makes up half of the officer presence on the TriMet system. It's important to note that officers will continue to respond for requests for service on transit. So it does not mean that policing will not happen if there are reports of criminal activity. I believe also Lake Oswego is letting their contract expire at the end of the year, and will not be renewing its contract. Those are the ones that I know of.
So in effect, Milwaukee will now respond to incidents that happen in Milwaukee, and Portland will respond in Portland, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
As far as ongoing, Ann and I have reached out to the director to set a meeting, and that's still in the scheduling process.
So I'm wondering, as far as in light of the equity goals for Milwaukee, what are the ramifications downstream if people pulling out of contracts for providing safety measures and protocols on TriMet through the use of the police forces? And so does that put TriMet in a position of having to fund other security measures? And what's the impact to people riding TriMet who are sometimes those that can't afford other means of transportation? Are there any safety or potential increased costs to services for people in marginalized communities, or that because of so many cities pulling out? So I just would hope that we're taking, that not only Milwaukee, because we're small compared to Portland's involvement, but we're all looking at any long-term ramifications for doing this.
Well, I think that the hope across the board is that TriMet sort of relook at how and why they're policing, the way they're policing, what they're policing for, because some data showed that their policing tended to be racially biased. And our hope is that they will rework their system and rework the hows and whys. And then we'll be back in a conversation with them about being partners again. But it was for the very reason of bias that we pulled out.
I don't know if you all have seen it or not, but I know TriMet is also doing a survey of just a general survey to the public, asking for feedback on what makes them feel safe on TriMet, how often they're riding, trying to get a clearer picture, and who they also want to know who is responding in that survey. So I don't know if it's still active or not. I think it might have expired at the end of August, but if it's still out there, I encourage anyone to take a look at it. It's pretty interesting and worth taking, even if you are an infrequent user of TriMet. They're still looking for your input.
Other questions? Shall we let Bonnie go on? The city manager says that John has given up on his computer and he's not rejoining us. So
he has. His technology is out. I will say that he also at the end of the email said, "Excellent report, Bonnie." So there you go.
All right, well, then I will continue on. Okay, so the next fund I wanted to go over is the City Hall Fund. This is the newly established fund for our purchase of the City Hall. This was based off acquiring the debt and the purchase. So we completed the debt on June 17th. And then we made the purchase shortly thereafter on the 22nd of June. And with that, we did receive a true interest cost of 2.61%. In the fund, on the financial statements, you'll see the money coming in this fund, and then the purchase, plus all the costs associated with the due diligence and the bond issuance costs and so forth. The actual debt service payments will be seen in the debt service fund, which is on the next fund, but you won't see that in this report. They actually start as of July. They started in this fiscal year. Any questions on the City Hall Fund? Moving into the Building Inspections Fund, or also known as the Building Fund, now that we changed the name in the previous budget, or the recent budget we adopted. The supplemental was included in this financials to cover the contractual services. We took the money from the revenue and used it towards contractual services to help with the costs associated with all of the projects that's been going on in the city. Overall, the fund is expected to end around $2.3 million. And from what I understand, the building fund. The department has not slowed down since there's been a lot of home projects and so forth underway. The next fund is the library fund. You'll see here one of the biggest items is the reduction in the fines and forfeitures. This is anticipated as we started to close public access to library fund. This is one of those areas where we did see the revenue drop because of the pandemic. Another area I wanted to point out is the $330,000 that is in the intergovernmental capital and other. I think at the last budget committee meeting we had, it was pointed out that seemed like it was in the wrong line item. So we did go back and we verified it, and we actually made this report a lot cleaner. But it is $330,000 that was originally budgeted and we didn't actually receive. I think that's all. Overall, the fund balance is at $756,000, which is what we anticipated.
Just one quick update so that everybody knows. The library is not actually collecting any fines right now because of the pandemic. So we're going to continue to see a significant reduction in this location. There are some other places, ticketing is down, parking enforcement's down. There's a lot of things that are down. So some of our fines and forfeitures will be continuing throughout the pandemic.
So the $5,187,000. I'm just having trouble. Okay, total by.
Which line item are you looking at?
The very last bottom corner. We're not under budget by $5 million. I mean, that's the way I read that.
No, it's actually taken the total. That's actually the reduction in the fund balance, and that's basically because of the capital project, the library being completed in the biennium.
Okay.
So that's a reduction in. So we started the biennium with $10 million in the fund. Mm-hmm. We've spent that down building a library, and that basically 5.2 million is the reduction in the fund balance. Good question. Okay. I'm going to move into the transportation fund. You'll see here is the local gas tax revenue under SSMP. This came in, it is showing $496,000 under the previous budget. I think we had discussed this a little bit last budget committee meeting when we went over the financials, that there is a component that is due to the COVID and pandemic and everybody working from home, but there's actually the other piece is that we budgeted too much during the last biennium. And so, but typically we do see about $200,000 to $300,000 that are coming in for the local gas tax.
As a side note on that, I recently saw an article that said that our traffic levels in the region were up to 90% of ordinary traffic levels at this point. So I know it'll take a while to show up in our gas tax revenue. That'll have quite a lag, but it does look like it's unfortunately creeping back to what it was.
So this local gas tax is the 1 or 2% that we put in as part of the SSMP. We still have a different pool of state gas tax that we get through revenue sharing, right?
We do, and that you'll see under the dedicated state gas tax program section.
Okay. Oh yeah, there we go.
So my question is the 2-month delay in current budget.
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. We do do an accrual back for a portion of that. And so the local gas tax, there's another $17,000 that didn't make it into this report because we just got those numbers in. But there's $17,000 in local gas tax that will be booked into this fiscal year 2020. And then state gas tax is $171,000.
So the 171 is in 2021. Is that what you're saying?
We received it in 2021, but we actually book it to fiscal year 2020 because it's for fiscal year 2020.
Okay, so the 200,000 you were talking about is going to be applied back to last year's budget.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Overall, the fund balance did have a decline from previous fiscal year. A lot of that is attributed to the capital projects and spending down those funds. And then there were some additional reductions in the materials and services in other areas, or personal services.
Is this where we would see the vehicle registration fee that the county?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually part of the state gas tax. It's not in its own separate line item.
Okay.
But it's part of the intergovernmental
commitment when the new gas tax, when the SSMP gas tax was adopted, was there was a commitment to spend it on street surface maintenance. So, I mean, I do think we need to keep that there, personally. I would like to have a better sense of what the vehicle registration fee is and because we were told what to expect, which was around $400,000 a year, just to know if that was a good prediction.
I also think it's valuable because that is a fee that our residents are paying when they register their vehicles, and I'd like them to be able to track how the city is benefiting.
Okay. So I can send you that number the next day or so, but I will start making sure that's outlined more in the report.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so that's all I had for transportation fund. I'm going to move into actually water, wastewater, and stormwater because they all have a very similar picture. So the areas, all of these funds actually see an increase in the fund balance, although you do see some decreases and declines in the fees and charges. But overall, there's several capital projects that are underway or have not yet started yet. But these three funds are doing well overall. We did have some declines in revenues especially in the water fund, as we're not shutting off folks, but that is extremely minimal in the grand scheme of the fund. So, yeah. Any other questions on water, wastewater, storm?
So that negative 4% prior year change, that's a reflection of the decrease in fees for water shutoffs and delayed payments. Am I reading that correctly? Sorry, that's on the top of page 18 under the water fund. Prior year change.
Yeah, it could be a number of things. We did do some changes in the rate study in this fiscal year. I'd have to get more detail for you.
It's okay. I was just curious if that was the sole thing reflected. I was wondering if it was the rate changes as well. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. The SDC funds, there's really not much to discuss there. Those are pretty much in line with expectations. The next fund I wanted to go over tonight is the Affordable Housing Fund, because there's activity in Affordable Housing Fund, which we haven't seen in the last couple of years. We've seen the revenue coming in, but recently we actually did spend some funds. We spent $132,000 towards the business relief funds, They're the grants. So you'll see that coming out in here. We also did receive a grant from the Oregon Business Development, which is considered a forgivable loan, which is why it's put under there as debt, which is very similar to the CARES Act and the general fund that we'll talk about more here shortly. But basically that money is it's grant, and then at some point will be considered forgivable or it'll be relieved. We're expecting the Oregon Business Development Grant Fund to be forgiven. But for accounting purposes, right now it has to show us proceeds from debt. Hopefully that makes sense.
That's only 35,000. I guess I thought we were seeking reimbursement for the full 132.
We actually probably can ask that of Brenna. She's actually on the call, and we may have actually put that request in, but as of the fourth quarter of June 30th, that money has not been receipted.
Brenna, do you mind jumping in on this? Are you here?
Yes, sorry, I was actually trying to go back through my emails to find what the exact amounts were. We did submit, and I believe, so July 23rd, Allison sent an email saying that Business Oregon offered the city an additional $97,000 in matching funds, fully matching the $132,000 from round one. So we are able to then use that money to move forward, and we're evaluating, I think, providing another round of business relief funding.
So that came through
happening this year as opposed to last quarter.
It happened in two additional tranches. So the first set came through, we paid the 132, then we received the first reimbursement, then there was a second reimbursement. So I also think that it just broke out differently depending on which reimbursement stream we were talking about. But I do know that I believe we've been leveraging the full 132,000 that council put towards this originally. So it's just over what point in time in the calendar.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I had for the quarterly report. If there's any other questions.
Other questions, anyone?
I actually do have a question, and it's sort of a process question. In the CIP, which is like I think the next to last page, there are a number of line items listed where there was no budget, and if you add it up, it's like over $1 million. And I guess what I'm wondering is, if this is the end of the year of a biennial budget, why at some point wasn't there a budget created for those kind of expenses?
Are you talking about the charts on pages 31, 32?
Yes.
Okay.
Like if you I have to go find it on my PDF because I can't read it on the. But on that page there's like a FEMA acquisition on Rusk Road, Department Vehicles, Public Works Generator, Greenhouse, Stormwater Capital Maintenance Program. Well, down to the Public Works Generator. And those, maybe that's not the one I was thinking of. I guess it doesn't really matter. My point is, why would we go for 2 years expending its, okay, so it's the state gas tax, 17th Avenue, Park Bridge, Monroe Street Neighborhood Greenway, Public Works Generator, South Downtown Traffic Control Plan. And those are fairly large expenditures from FY19 that never had a budget to them. And I'm just wondering why. I mean, obviously we didn't exceed our bottom line, but I still don't understand what why that would happen.
A great question, and I don't want to give you a bad answer. Kelly Brooks has been managing the CIP, and I'd like to ask her that question and get you a response in writing. So if you're okay with it, it's a great question.
That's fine. It's a process question. I mean, clearly it didn't affect our bottom line, but I just don't understand why we would spend 2 years not,
Totally. No, and I'm not sure. Funds. Especially since we did all those things, which is why I'm listening to the list going, but we did actually accomplish all those things. And
we did.
So it's interesting that we didn't have a budget on it. Let me talk to Kelly and we'll get you a written response.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
By the way, Leslie, I always appreciate your questions because they always make me think. So keep them up. Please know that this is a statement of keep going. This is helpful. Thank you.
Well, I always feel like I'm just sort of on the edges of where everybody else is. But if I'm confused, maybe I'm not the only one.
Exactly. And you help me even see things differently too. So thank you. And we'll look at it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I didn't realize that 17th Avenue ran into this budget. I thought it was finished in the budget before, but I guess.
Well, and I think the work was done. I think that, remember, there was the lawsuit that continued over into the new fiscal year. So I think our expenditures were out, but we were still waiting on determining if there was any additional overages that we needed to deal with from our side of the lawsuit. So I think that's what it was on that one, but that doesn't answer things like the generator or other pieces. So we'll keep looking. I appreciate it though.
Oh yeah, you can fix, there's a reference on page 33 to Riverfront Park. You could fix that to save Milwaukee Bay Park.
That might be something we should do really easily. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, and I think that this may be how we want to actually add in an update to the quarterly report. The easiest part actually may be just attaching the CIP update that engineering is doing in that document so that we do have sort of a continual update to all of this work at the right period in time and it's more usable. So we'll talk to Kelly about how she wants to pull those pieces together, but I think there's a better narrative that we can add to this.
All right, any other questions on the quarterly report? If not, we'll move to the discussion items, which begin with CARES Act.
Yeah, so actually I'm going to turn over a lot of this discussion to Brenna Cruz. She is one of our newest employees to the city of Milwaukee. She's actually the first time being here in budget committee meeting. Brenna, I'm going to introduce you a little bit that she's actually just started as a events coordinator, but it turns out that she's been phenomenal in all the grants management, which we really needed, and we really appreciated her. And she's been working really closely with the finance team and appreciated her. So I'm going to actually turn this over to her to explain the CARES Act in more detail.
And today is, or like this week is her 6-month anniversary of being here, and she's nailed it, all of it. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good evening, everyone. Just going to provide a little high-level detail about where the CARES Act funding came from, and then we can get into the numbers. So Congress passed a bill stimulus funding entitled Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And with that, funding went to states and local governments with populations of 500,000 or more. So the first allocation that Oregon received went to the state, and it also went to Multnomah and Washington County, and then to Portland. And then there were some remainder funds that the state had kind of designated that it would trickle down into local city governments and counties that didn't meet that population threshold. So the first amount that the state decided to award to the local governments was about $400 million. And with that, the city had applied for reimbursement just a little over $423,000 in June for expenditures that we had incurred between March 1 and May 15th that we hadn't already allocated to another reimbursement fund. And then their state had some remaining funding set aside, and the total balance of that they allocated was right under $134 million that they then released to counties and city governments based on the population size. So with that, the city of Milwaukee was awarded just a little over $603,000. And again, that was based on our population per capita, in addition to like what the county was receiving and other local city governments within the county. So we're still able to share a little bit if we have a resource need from the county. And that $603,000 will be put towards expenses incurred between March 1st and December 30th. What that means is that those are expenses or items that we've already spent money on, or that we have a contract in place with a contractor where we've committed spending money on some of that funds. So from this allotment, our second round reimbursement was almost $375,000. And sorry, I think I said 100 twice in there, but anyway. And that was for expenditures from March 1st through June 30th that we hadn't submitted for again. And then our next round of reimbursement was just a little over $28,000 for recent expenditures incurred up to August 7th. The next round of funding is going to be opening up on September 14th. And these are going to be for, again, expenses incurred between March 1st and September 11th, and then so on and so on. And we'll just go on down until we spend through that $600,000 amount that was allocated to us. And so with that, what the city has been applying funds towards was obviously, we just discussed our community business relief funds. We've been having to make facility upgrades for staff and residents so that we can maintain social distancing in the building. And this also includes some of the placards that you may have seen in the building, sort of measuring out what those distances are, and also putting up like the sneeze guard shields for the folks in the front office who they're interfacing with members of the public as they come in. Restoring materials and service cuts that were issued during the budget process. Our telework and digital public access so allows me to be here just like the rest of my colleagues interfacing with you. We've been having to make equipment purchases, Zoom account purchases, and things like that to keep the business, the city moving forward. We expanded a neighborhood greenway space, and so what this did was opened up city streets and allowed for more residents to recreate on the space, whether biking, walking, etc., and allow for some safe social distancing. And then we obviously needed to create public awareness messaging that put towards that. So some of the drive slow signs that you've seen around town were helping support that. And we've also established a rental assistance program with Northwest Housing Alternatives. The fund was, I believe, right around $25,000 to help the city's COVID-19 impacted residents. We've also provided resources and to establish a partnership with St. Vincent de Paul to set up utility payment assistance to households that are economically impacted by COVID-19. And we're also setting aside about 20% of the funds that we've received for any future expenses that may arise due to new stay-at-home orders or any other sort of needs or purchases that we might need to have to, again, just protect our employees and promote public safety and awareness.
Brenna, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
And this is, I guess, probably under the community business relief funds, but I was just curious if, you know, if we have restaurants or other businesses downtown that have put infrastructure outside for the summer, is that an eligible expense? You know, like adding tables and chairs and canopies outdoors. I've seen a number of those around town.
Yeah, I believe I don't know necessarily in regards to the business being able to submit for those expenditures. I will have to look further into that to see what specific criteria is related to them. But I would assume that based on how some of this funding is structured, it's possible that any budget costs that were unplanned for in order to be able to operate in this time of COVID to safeguard, again, your employees and the public. It could perceivably be, but I'll have to get back with you on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is the way this process works is we have to spend the money and then they reimburse it. Is there any way of knowing that if we were to proactively pay off people's rents who aren't going to be able to catch up for 6 or 8 months worth of rent because they were already low income, spending 50% of their income for rent, and now they're out of work and they're not getting unemployment in many cases. So those folks are going to be homeless in March when the state's process finishes out. Is there a way, if we can find them, to pay off those rents and be assured that we can get that money back?
So do you mind, Brenna, if I tackle this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we, Mayor, during the budget cycle, you all prioritized $25,000 towards Northwest Housing. That was so that Northwest Housing has a lot of connections into the community that is struggling, more so than we do. And they have a built trust in those relationships. And so a big part of this was they have the staff who know how to do this work. They're able to do it efficiently. And we love working with them. They're really fantastic people. So we met with them, I think 2 weeks ago. They let me know that they had expended $10,000 of the 25. They were on track for expending the rest of that through the end of this month and into October. And then they were going to be out of cash. With Brenna's assistance, we actually are using this CARES Act to take that $25,000 and rematch it back to them, which is allowed for under the CARES Act. So we will be talking about on Facebook, directing people there just to make sure that the people who are most in need are the ones who are getting this money in Milwaukee, and that there are people who are otherwise going to fall through the cracks of the system. So there are people who are already readily into the system at Clackamas County. That's great. This really was a stopgap based on our conversation for individuals who were otherwise going to get lost. Northwest Housing has been amazing to work with on this. I can't say enough good things about them. So I think continuing to give them ways to do that work is really important. Where we're going to start running into a difficult position with them is that they also have overhead costs, and the CARES Act money cannot be used for overhead expenses. So the discussion we've had with them is actually asking them to hold back a percentage of the $25,000 for this next allocation so that they have enough staff capacity to do this work ongoing. So it won't be a full match to the $25,000, but that's why, is because I need them to also be okay internally as a nonprofit. But I believe we were landing around $19,000 to $20,000 that we would rematch. My further understanding is that once they've expended those dollars, then we could rematch again. But again, we'd have to figure out how to do their internal workings. So it's an ongoing conversation. Christina Fadenreck has been leading those with Layla Amon. And yeah, I can't. Northwest Housing is amazing. Go Trell. Thank you to the staff over there for doing such excellent work.
Right. I know that. I guess my curiosity, and maybe we don't know the answer to this, but is whether, doing this in these little tranches like this of 25,000, then 19, and then, it'll get smaller and smaller through that process, is going to X number of people. If there's a people that we're not, that are going to be people that need this, if we can front cash from whatever source, do we know for a fact that we would get it back? That's
only So only up to our allocation level. That's part of the difficulty. And so we are actually expending a large amount of that allocation level. So instead, what I'm doing is I actually have a meeting coming up with Rich at the county and with Gary Schmidt at the county. He's the county manager, to see if there are ways that they can leverage their funds differently. There's also the Metro bond dollars are coming out. This is an allowable expense under the new Metro bond dollars. And so I had a conversation with Metro COO about whether or not this would be an allowable portion of their plan, Clackamas's plan for expenditures. She confirmed that it would be. So that meeting is happening after Labor Day. As soon as Gary's back in town, we'll be talking, or at least back at the office, we'll be talking about that. But they are the individuals who are set up to use those funds and these other dollars better. And so we're trying to get them to put those funds to that use.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're able to access all of the cash that we've been allotted, and that whatever we don't need for city operations can go into solving this problem.
Absolutely. And that's why we also have the utility funding that we put towards this through St. Vincent's that Brenna mentioned. Those are also dollars where we could receive a reimbursement. And we're waiting to see how those expenditures are going to. We just executed on that contract per our discussion during the budget cycle that we would wait until people's bills actually started coming due or people started not receiving the federal checks. The federal checks went away. We executed on the contract so that we can start providing that coverage. So yes, the city is stepping in wherever we can right now. I know I've already said it once about Brenna, but she has been looking for these dollars and has been helping us figure out ways to expend these within the confines of the law. The other concern that I run into is just making sure that we don't overexpend the grant dollars, because then I have to make them up. And I don't actually have the money right now to make those up either. So Brenna has been the person, she's been the glue kind of keeping this all together. The 20% is also because we don't know how COVID is changing. We don't know how our buildings needs at the library, at PD, and other places are going to change. And so making sure that we have adequate resources for any improvements to those facilities, especially in places where we have to have people show up every day. Those would mainly be Public Works and the Public Safety Building, where we have done improvements. But this is a disease we don't understand fully still. And so making sure we have some flexibility is really critical.
That funding, as I recall, maybe I'm wrong about this, has to be expended by the end of the fiscal year?
December 31st.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right.
All the things. I am trying to spend every penny of this. And I will tell you that Kelly Brooks actually wants to spend this money more than I do. And she is watching it with Brenna every day and having this discussion. So we will be checking in with you. We have a November meeting again for the budget committee. We'll have a better sense for how much money we can quickly allocate if we don't have other needs. But Brenna really has been trying to figure out a way to get these out the door quickly. Northwest Housing, I believe it was 8 families that they had already served when I talked to them 2 weeks ago. This had been a couple of families that otherwise would have been out of their homes. So I appreciate that they're stepping into some gaps and trying to fill them.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. But I will say, if somebody knows of a family that is falling through holes and gaps, please reach out to Northwest Housing and explain what's going on. Even if these funds aren't the perfect funds for that family, they are an incredible resource, and we have an open conversation with them. So our goal right now is to keep as many Milwaukeeans housed as possible.
I had a question in terms of our own facilities. I mean, I know, splash guards or whatever you call them, and we have the big window in City Hall, but are we doing any kind of like temperature screening technology? Like I've heard there are these things you can put over your door that is just taking the temperature of everybody who walks in the door, that kind of thing. Are we doing any of that in anticipation of opening doors someday?
One day. A couple of things. One is that Peter Passarelli, for those of you who don't know, was actually in the military and did logistics. So he has been in charge of this with Brenna. He's been an incredible resource and has been making sure that we're looking at all the technologies as they're changing. Between the two of them, I am getting emails probably once a week with an update about what is the best practice around masks that we need to change within our policies. What's the best practice around temperatures? What's the best practice around building and facilities. So I really appreciate that they are on it. I know that you had reached out to Peter at one point and asked him about doing the scanners as you come into the building. And I believe his response was that there was a back order. It was really actually hard at this point to get those types of tools. So that's what I do know. I do know he did buy thermometers, and we have created safety check locations for employees as they're coming into the building if they are interested in making sure that they do not have a temperature. I personally bought my own just as a tool for keeping with me to make sure that before I walk into a building, I'm not putting anybody else in jeopardy.
Are there any legal issues with it when you start talking about scanners you put over doorways for government agencies to be collecting that without permission or without people knowing it's there?
I feel like you might be an HR manager.
I've got a little background in that.
A little one. Yes, we have been having those conversations. That's part of why this has been dicey, is just making sure that we're staying within our contracts and that we're negotiating with our employees as we're going through this process. They've been incredible to work with. I think that there's an interest in making sure that they're staying safe too. In terms of the general public coming into the building, we do not have the general public coming into our buildings unless they have an appointment right now. That is an option. If you have an appointment, you need to drop something off, you need a conversation. But in those cases, we're making sure that our employees have safety precautions in place just to protect them in those situations. Where it's really coming in is actually on sites for construction. So that's where I'm having the most interactions between staff and the public right now, is just we have a large number of construction sites where our staff have to be somewhat close. Our staff are great about wearing masks on those sites. And we have made it a requirement that people talking to them also wear masks, but that can be hard and political, as all of you know.
Well,
Mary, I was just going to say, Mary, if you want to enjoy some fun now that you have left your full-time job, I'm happy to talk to you about all the crazy things I've learned about.
Oh, I'm talking to my colleagues about all those crazy things, yeah.
I'm sure you are. It's been quite an education for me.
Yeah.
Anything else on COVID? Okay. So the next one's actually Bonnie, I believe, and the software package.
I don't know. Did you want to mention the audit, though, real quick on the CARES Act?
Why don't you? That's actually something that came through you.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention that the state is auditing the city of Milwaukee for the first disbursement. We are waiting on word from that audit. We've already submitted all of our documentation and everything. We also have informed our auditors. But that's just the nature of how these are grants are working through. So the state's auditing us. We'll also get audited at some point by our auditors. But I just wanted to make sure that was pointed out.
I also really appreciate that the state is doing this, in part because the clarity has been lacking around the expense of the funds. They did not receive the kind of guidance that they needed from the federal government, so I'm not throwing them under the bus on this one. They're trying to figure this out too. So us being audited actually gives me some clarity that we've been lacking since the receipt of these funds, and we're hopeful that that'll help this go smoother in the future.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the budget tool. So during the budgeting process, the finance department presented the budget, which the majority of the budget is actually all done in Excel. And now that you all have seen that document, you can see all the tables that we've had to put together. It's a very labor-intensive process, and there is no errors. but there is room for potential errors. So one of the things that I did propose in the budget was having a budgeting tool. And in doing so, I've done a lot of research. I've looked at a couple different budgeting tools out there. The one that's stuck out the most as one that's actually going to fit a lot of the needs and check off a lot of the boxes for the city is called OpenGov. OpenGov is basically will offer about three main things. One, it's a robust tool. It's going to allow for, during the budget process, the departments to actually put in their budget into this tool. There's an audit trail. There's a lot of so we're looking for. It's basically where once you submit your proposal, it will go through a chain. We'll get it set up so that once I'll see it, it'll go to Ian. It'll go through a process, a workflow. So that's one thing that will be a lot easier in the budget process and a lot better communication through the departments and so forth. The second thing that this budgeting tool will allow is that it's connected to our financial system. So it's a real-time presentation of where we're at in our financials. So there's an ongoing monitoring tool that this OpenGov would actually have for the departments and for the directors. So right now, if you looked at our Encode financial system, it is very much geared towards the finance mindset. It's definitely not quite that user-friendly if you're not used to looking at financial documents or financial reports on a day-to-day basis. So this tool will actually have a much more user-friendly interface for departments and for managers to look at their budgets and be able to monitor where they're at. And then the last thing that's really key for me also was the reporting aspects for it. I'm hopeful that with this tool that actually even the quarterly report might look a little bit differently as I'm able to extrapolate the data in a different format and present it all to you. I'm not sure if it'll be ready by the next the next budget committee meeting, but I'm hopeful that will play a part in this budgeting tool. So this tool has a setup fee of about $65,000, which will be absorbed in the budget that we just got adopted. But there will be an ongoing annual component of $35,500, which is a subscription fee that we will need to work through in the next budget cycle. It is for a 5-year contract, but it's overall a tool that I'm really looking forward to using and hopefully have more information for you all at the next budget committee meeting. We are taking this to City Council for approval on September 16th.
And am I remembering correctly that the auditors also had worked with this and thought it was a useful tool? Am I making that up?
No, actually, I think during our audit committee meeting, we did talk briefly about OpenGov. We were looking at OpenGov and one other company, and they have used it before. They've seen it in their clients before.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So 2 questions. One is you mentioned it interfaces with the financial system. Does it also interface with the HRIS system so you can get real-time information on actual personnel costs? And then the other one, are there other local government entities that are in the area that you've talked to that can speak to the customers, ongoing customer support?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure about the HR system component. So let me double check into that.
But we'll look at it. Yeah. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah. And then I have received some feedback from other cities. I'm in the middle of vetting some of that right now for getting ready for the staff report and so forth. So I can definitely get more information as I'm gathering that data, but I have received similar information. I've also received similar staff reports. So there's a lot of cities that are actually using OpenGov. Where I used to work, which actually City of Loveland uses OpenGov. It's a pretty well-known system.
I've used it as well. Historically, one of the benefits for for council and for me is that you can actually track the expenditures associated with the council goals. So part of why I like this is it starts giving us some real-time understanding for how budget and goals are matching up and making sure that the organization is actually tracking towards the new council goals.
And it's not replacing a system we have because we've only been using Excel.
Well, it's replacing Excel.
It's not bad.
Not bad.
But the encode that you mentioned, we still need that. It doesn't do the functions that does.
Right. No, it's not going to replace our financial system, which handles payroll, accounts payable, all the other functions. It basically takes the data from encode and connects it to their system. I really like Excel, but there's a point where I have to cut it off.
Any other questions?
I'm impressed that you can manage that much data in Excel.
I'm really impressed that you can manage that much data in an Excel workbook, because I'm glad you're doing this. I'm glad you're exploring this.
I also don't think I've ever heard someone say, I really like Excel.
Accounting geek in me, that's for sure.
Okay, any other questions for Bonnie? All right, then.
And then I believe I have the last piece. But actually, before we get there, Councillor Heise, you asked a question about the CARES Act funding, and Brenna has a response. So I was just going to give her a second to give that up.
Edie.
Hello again. So looking at the eligibility criteria for what the business relief loans can be used for, they're to cover employee paychecks so they can retain employees, any loss of revenue experienced due to a decline in business or sales, and then obviously to offset some of the debt or a previous loan that the business may be needing to make payments on.
Great, thank you.
So I believe that the last piece of our budget narrative update is that Council in August set a new council goal, which is equity, inclusion, and justice. And with that goal, there was in the resolution an outline of some pieces that were requested immediately by council for action. And that list included immediate training, which the budget committee actually supported through the budget process. So thank you. We have been doing those trainings. We're about halfway through the trainings, actually maybe a little more, maybe 2/3 of the way through the trainings for the AFSCME related staff and management. And actually on Wednesday this week, I'll be in implicit bias training with the management of the PD. The staff of the PD are going through that, I believe, tomorrow. So we are expending those dollars. The next piece is that we are hiring a full-time equity program manager. That position will post publicly tomorrow. We're not asking formally for a budget adjustment at this time, but we do expect within the year that we'll need to true up the city manager's budget with additional personnel revenue or funds in order to cover the cost of the additional FTE within our budget. And then we are waiting for that person to come on board to talk about other expenditures moving forward. We'd like to have them on board to talk about what the highest priorities are. Prior to further expenditures, we also are doing listening sessions. We've made it through 2 of our 3 listening sessions, and those will also help guide us for future expenditures. So I'll know more by the November meeting about what any adjustments may be for the equity programming. But for right now, because we're so early in our budget cycle, we are simply proceeding with council's direction to start those expenditures, and we'll come back to you to ask for some assistance in moving cash around. Any questions about that work?
And this position is externally focused primarily?
Interesting question. It's going to be some of both. So part of this was we had asked, I was holding until after some of the listening sessions. I had hoped to hold until after all of them, but one of them was moved out a couple of weeks so that I would understand what the ask is from our community. We received both. We received a request for assistance in creating a dialogue externally and to having more focus on that component, but we also received asks for our hiring practices and focusing on our hiring and also on our police department and on certain questions about our police department. So I am looking at this as a 50-50 split during the hiring process, but I'll be very clear with everyone that that'll shift back and forth over time and that we'll have to create a work plan based on the current needs of the community and of the city for a 6-month basis and roll it every 6 months.
So I hadn't heard that one of the listening sessions didn't come off. What was the delay?
Yeah, so we had been working with ISO Consulting in order to bring together a Spanish spoken event. And we, at the time, let's see, it was supposed to be on Monday. It was Friday afternoon. We only had a couple of families signed up. And to make this a really robust opportunity, we asked them to go back out to the community and try and secure additional families for participation. So at this point, they believe that they have 10 families for participation. And so we'll be holding that event, I believe, on September 10th. I'm looking at Councilor Heisey since she'll be the council member present. Yep. Okay. So it'll be held on September 10th.
Other questions for the city manager?
Okay. Feel free to reach out if you have individual questions. I'm happy to chat.
Thank you.
Is that the end of our agenda? Other items. Other items. Other items. Going once? Going twice?
Gone.
Would you like to entertain a motion to adjourn?
That's Wilda's job.
Oh, wait, it's early.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Wilda.
What can I say? Hearing no other comments from the group, I would move to adjourn this meeting.
Can I second?
Moved and seconded to adjourn the budget committee meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one's jumping up and down opposed, so I guess we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, John.